For 8 years I couldn't move. And he took full advantage of that. I used to believe that no matter what happened in life, your children were the safest people to lean on. I believed that love, the kind that comes from a mother's sacrifice, would always be returned with kindness. But I was wrong, because the boy I raised, the one I protected through everything, he turned out to be the one who destroyed me. My name is Miriam Palmer. I'm 71 years old, and for 8 years, while the world saw my son Zach as a devoted caregiver, he was slowly turning my life into a private nightmare. At first, it was little things. Extra long baths. Massages that drifted where they shouldn't. But then came the day I couldn't even trust the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. I had suffered a stroke and lost control of half my body. I was helpless, vulnerable, silenced. And in that silence, he thrived. The neighbors praised him. Zach is such a good son, they'd say. He gave up everything to care for his mother. But they didn't see the closed doors. They didn't hear the way he'd whisper things to me at night. They didn't know what he did when the lights were off. And for years I said nothing. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. Because every time I tried to speak, he'd smile and say, "No one would believe you, Mom. Not over me." But this is not just a story of horror. This is the story of how I broke the silence. How one scream, just one, was enough to crack open the lie. And how I went from being his prisoner to the woman who watched him beg at her feet. You're not ready for what you're about to hear. But if you stay with me, I'll show you what survival really looks like. I had Zach when I was barely 20. He was born in the middle of winter, in a tiny apartment above a laundromat in Fort Collins. I remember holding him the first time, my hands trembling from exhaustion, fear, and love all at once. I had no family nearby, no husband, just a job at the hospital and a child I had no idea how to raise. But I made him my reason. Every diaper, every night shift, every skipped meal, it was all for him. I worked as a nurse for over 3 decades. Sometimes 2 jobs. Sometimes 3. I cleaned surgical tools during the night and administered medication during the day. I missed birthdays, school plays, and football games, but he never lacked anything. Zach was a quiet boy. Polite, smart, but not the best in class. He didn't have many friends, but he clung to me like I was his whole world. I thought it was love. I thought I was raising a good man. When he turned 16, he started staying up later. I'd come home exhausted, and he'd be in the living room, waiting, watching. At first, I found it sweet. He's making sure I get home safe, I told myself. But over time, things shifted. He started noticing what I wore. If I came out of the bathroom in a robe, his eyes lingered longer than they should. He started walking into my bedroom without knocking, claiming he needed laundry baskets or just wanted to talk. I remember one day I was folding towels and he came up behind me and pressed his body against mine. I froze. He laughed and said, "Relax, Mom. I'm just hugging you." And I wanted to believe it. Because what mother wants to believe her son is crossing a line that can't be uncrossed? I told myself I was overreacting, that it was my fault for thinking anything bad. I chalked it up to exhaustion, hormones, the stress of working double shifts. But then came the night I couldn't explain away. I had just gotten home from an overnight shift. The hospital had been understaffed and chaotic. I was barely standing. I showered, changed into pajamas, and collapsed into bed. A few hours later, I woke up to someone lying next to me, breathing heavy. Close. Too close. I turned my head. It was Zach. He wasn't a child. He was 24. And he was shirtless. And he was pretending to be asleep. I sat up, heart racing, my throat dry. "Zach?" I whispered. No answer. I nudged him. Still nothing. And when I finally shook him harder, he blinked and said, "I had a nightmare. I didn't want to be alone." I was frozen. Not just from fear, but from disbelief. Because how do you say no when the one asking is your son? And you've spent your whole life giving him everything? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea I never drank, staring at the wall, trying to convince myself I had overreacted. But the truth was there. I felt it in my skin. Something was changing. Something was slipping. The boundaries were no longer boundaries. The air in our home wasn't safe anymore. And then came the stroke. It happened on a Sunday morning, while I was watering the plants in the backyard. I remember a loud ringing in my ear, the ground tilting, and then nothing. When I woke up in the hospital, I couldn't move my left side. My arm. My leg. My face felt heavy. I couldn't speak for days. Only small groans and eye blinks. Zach was there when I opened my eyes. Tears in his. Smiling like he had been waiting for me. "I'm going to take care of you, Mom," he whispered. "I promise." And I believed him. Because how could I not? He was my son. He was all I had. And I didn't yet know that this promise would become my prison. The first few weeks after I came home from the hospital were blurry. Everything was unfamiliar, my own house, my body. Even the sound of my voice. The stroke had left me unable to use the entire left side of my body. I couldn't stand without help. I couldn't dress myself. I couldn't even hold a spoon steady. Zach moved me into the downstairs bedroom. He rearranged the furniture, bought a hospital-style bed, and installed a small bell on the nightstand in case I needed anything. He said all the right things. "You're safe now. I've got you, Mom. I'll take care of everything." At first, I was grateful. Terrified, yes, but grateful. He cooked for me, bathed me, brushed my hair. He'd sit beside me and read articles aloud or talk about old family vacations like we were simply waiting out a storm together. And maybe in another world, maybe that's all it would have been. But it didn't take long before the storm became something else entirely. About 2 weeks after I returned home, a nurse named Lillian began visiting the house. She was assigned through a recovery program at the hospital, sweet, patient in her 50s. She brought physical therapy bands, exercises, and helped me with bathing and personal care. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. But Zach didn't like her. "She's too rough," he said. "She doesn't know how to handle someone as delicate as you." I told him I was fine, that she was professional. But the next day, he told Lillian not to come back. "She's confusing, Mom." He told the agency. "She gets upset after each visit. We're going to hire privately." Only he never did. Lillian never returned. No one did. From then on, everything went through Zach. Baths, meals, medication, even my communication with the outside world. At first, he said I needed quiet to recover. Then he said visitors made me anxious. Then he stopped answering the door altogether. "Rest is medicine," he'd say, pulling the blind shut. "You don't want people seeing you like this, do you?" I started to feel like I was disappearing. And that's when the bathing changed. It started innocently enough. He'd help me into the tub, wash my hair, rinse my back. But soon his hands lingered longer than they should have. His movements became slower, more deliberate. And he stopped averting his eyes when I asked him to. One afternoon, I asked if we could install a bar in the tub so I could try cleaning myself. He laughed. "Mom, you can't even grip a toothbrush. Why would you want to fall and make things worse?" That night, he gave me a longer bath than usual. He scrubbed my chest in slow circles. I tried to pull away, but the water was hot, the air thick, and my body didn't respond the way I wanted. "Mom," he whispered, "you don't have to be ashamed. I'm just making sure you're clean. You do the same for me." But it didn't feel like care. It felt like something else entirely. And when I tried to talk to him the next morning to tell him I didn't want him in the bathroom with me anymore, he got quiet. Not angry, not loud, just cold. "I gave up my entire life for you," he said. "I could have walked away like Dad did. But I stayed. And now this is how you repay me." I apologized. I still don't know why. Maybe because I was scared. Maybe because I was ashamed. Or maybe because, deep down, I didn't know how to survive without him. Every day after that, he reminded me what I owed him. He started counting things out loud. How many hours I feed you. How many diapers I change. How many times I stop you from choking on your pills? And I started counting something else. How many minutes a day I felt safe in my own home. That number dropped to 0. He stopped giving me access to my phone. He said I made slurred calls and worried people. He changed the Wi-Fi password. He told the pharmacy to send all medication updates to his email, not mine. And then one evening I heard him on the phone with someone laughing. "She's basically furniture now," he said. I could leave for hours and she wouldn't even know. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that call. Something in me cracked that night. Not a scream. Not a fight. Just a quiet click, like a light going out. But that was the moment I stopped believing this was going to get better on its own. Something had shifted in his tone. He didn't just want to care for me anymore. He wanted to own me. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. At some point, the line between caregiver and captor disappeared. But I couldn't tell you the exact day it happened. Because when you live inside a cage long enough, you forget where the bars begin. Zach didn't scream. He didn't hit. His cruelty was quieter than that. It came dressed in routines. He started calling me patient instead of mom. You ready for your morning assessment? He'd say, as if we were in a hospital. He kept a clipboard by my bed and jotted things down every morning. How long I slept, how much I ate, how many times I went to the bathroom. But he wasn't tracking my health. He was tracking my submission. And when I questioned it just gently once, he said, "This is for your safety. You don't want another stroke, do you?" He used fear like anesthesia. I remember one day, a church volunteer came by, someone I barely knew. Zach met her at the door, cracked it open 2 inches. "She's asleep," he told her. "She's been restless all night. We're trying to keep her calm." I heard her voice float through the walls. "Oh, tell her we're praying for her." That was the last visitor I ever heard. He unplugged the doorbell the next week. He said the sound startled me. And I believed him. Because he had a way of making every invasion sound like protection. A way of using my own body against me. That was his weapon, my dependency. If I pushed back, he'd hold the spoon just out of reach. If I cried, he'd withhold the pain meds for a few extra hours to build tolerance. He once whispered, "You think anyone else would wipe you 3 times a day? You should be thanking me." I did thank him. That was the worst part. I thanked him the way a chair thanks someone for sitting down, silent, immobile, and taken for granted. Because in that house, gratitude wasn't love. It was survival. Because in that house, gratitude became a form of survival. And then came the first full violation. He'd been giving me these so-called lymphatic massages to prevent bed sores. He said he read about them online, claimed they were medically necessary. I hated them. They left me feeling hollow. His hands wandered. He pressed too long, too low. But I said nothing. One afternoon, he came in with gloves. Said we were going to do a deeper internal check to prevent urinary infections. My mouth went dry. I tried to shift away, but my body wouldn't move. He leaned in, smiled, and said, "Mom, this is what love looks like when you're sick." I shut my eyes. And for the first time, I disassociated. I drifted outside of myself. Like a bird watching a horror show through a window. I wasn't there. Not really. After that, it became a routine. The afternoon, cleaning. The evening, stretching. The bedtime, settling. He never called it what it was. But I knew. God, I knew. I tried to get help. Once I waited until he went out for groceries. It was a rare hour where the house felt mine again. I used my one good hand to drag the landline off the nightstand. I called 911. I couldn't speak clearly, my voice was still weak, broken from months of misuse. But I tried. "I need help." I slurred. The operator asked me to repeat. I tried again. Silence. Then Zach walked in. He saw the phone. His eyes narrowed. He didn't yell. Instead, he walked over, gently took the receiver, and said, "Sorry, my mother has a condition. She tends to imagine things. We're working with her neurologist." He hung up. Then he smiled. "I guess we're not leaving the phone in here anymore." That night, he took it apart piece by piece. He also moved the TV remote out of reach. He placed my pills in a locked cabinet. He changed the Wi-Fi password again. He became my doctor, my warden. My God. One morning I tried to tell him to stop, really tell him. But my words came out slurred, slow, broken like shattered glass. He leaned down and said, "People with brain damage shouldn't accuse others. It makes them sound unstable." And I realized, he wasn't just trying to control me. He was building a case that I was crazy. So if I ever got out, he could say, "She's confused. Poor woman. Doesn't know what she's saying." That thought chilled me more than anything. Because now I wasn't just paralyzed. I was being erased. There comes a point when even pain stops hurting. It just settles into the walls. Becomes the wallpaper of your days. And you stop reacting. You just endure. That's where I was. It had been over 7 years. 7 years of silence, of lying still, of letting my mind float above my body like a ghost. 7 years of watching the clock tick in a house where every minute was his. Zach barely spoke anymore. He didn't need to. He had reduced me to a schedule, a checklist. A body that responded when needed and shut up the rest of the time. Sometimes I wondered if he even remembered I was a person. Until one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. He had been rougher than usual that day. His hands, no longer pretending to be gentle, gripped my waist and forced my legs apart like he was sorting laundry, not touching his mother. And I don't know what happened in me. I can't explain it. Something cracked. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was the feeling of his breath against my ear. Maybe it was the way he whispered. No one's ever going to find out. You need me. Whatever it was, I screamed. I screamed from somewhere deep. Somewhere I didn't even know still existed. It wasn't words. Just raw, desperate sound. And I kept going. Over and over, like an alarm clock that wouldn't shut off. Zach panicked. He grabbed a pillow and tried to muffle me. Mom, stop it. You're confused. Stop. But I didn't. Because in that moment I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was afraid of dying quietly. What neither of us knew was that someone was home next door. Emily Rosen, a 21-year-old psychology student who rented the upstairs unit at the duplex across the fence. She was supposed to be in class that day, but she had a migraine and stayed home. She was in bed, scrolling through her phone when she heard it. She told me later. At first I thought it was a dog howling. Then I realized it was human. And it didn't sound like someone crying. It sounded like someone being broken. Emily didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone, turned on the voice recorder, and started documenting what she heard. Then she called 911. I don't know what's happening, she told them. But it's not okay. You need to come now. Meanwhile, Zach was pacing. He opened the blinds just a crack and saw flashing lights at the corner. He bolted the front door, unplugged every device, told me to play along. You tell them I take care of you, he said, teeth clenched. You lie. Or I swear to God I'll put you in a place you'll never see the sky again. But when the knock came, it wasn't just one officer. It was 2 cops in EMT. And a social worker. Emily had told them what she suspected. Zach tried to talk. She had a seizure. She screams sometimes. It's a neurological thing, she gets confused. But the EMT stepped forward and said, Sir, we'll need to speak with her directly. I'm her caregiver, he pushed back. She needs me in the room. No, the officer said firm. She doesn't. That was the first time in almost a decade that I was in a room without him. Just me. And people who could listen. They asked questions gently. At first I couldn't speak much. My mouth was dry. My body frozen. So they tried a different method. Can you blink twice if someone has hurt you? I blinked. Is it someone in your family? I blinked again. The social worker, a woman named Karen McBride, took my hand and said, We believe you. You're safe now. Those words. I hadn't heard them in so long I forgot they existed. They took me to the hospital immediately. And this time, they didn't just examine my body. They listened to my soul. The doctor who examined me found signs, old and new. Bruises in places no one should have bruises. Tearing that shouldn't exist in a woman who hadn't been sexually active in decades. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. When they showed Zach the medical report, he laughed. Said I was senile. Said I had dementia. Said they were framing him. But no one believed him this time. Because the house of lies he'd built had finally cracked. And the scream that started it all was still echoing. They arrested him that night. I watched from the hospital window as they put him in the back of the cruiser. His face pale. His mouth running. But no one was listening anymore. And for the first time since my stroke, I slept without locking my fear inside my chest. The hospital kept me for 10 days. Not because my condition was severe, but because they didn't want to send me anywhere unsafe. The nurses moved slowly around me, gentle, careful, like I was made of paper and shame. But they also smiled. They said things like, You're strong, and you did the right thing. And I needed to hear that. Because for 8 years, the only voice I'd heard said otherwise. A social worker came in on the 3rd day with a clipboard and a problem. You don't have any immediate family to discharge you to, she said. We can start placing you in a long-term care facility, but... No. I don't remember if I said it or mouthed it. But I was clear. I wasn't going from one prison to another. That night, a nurse handed me a phone. There's someone asking for you, she said. The voice on the other end was warm. Steady. Familiar. Miriam? It's Reese. Reese Howard. I froze. Reese had been my best friend in nursing school. We lost touch after she moved to Aurora and opened her own rehab clinic. I saw the news. She said. Someone posted the story on Facebook. I don't know what you need right now, but if there's any chance I can help, I'm here. 3 days later, she showed up with a van and a folded wheelchair. She had salt in her hair now and wore orthopedic shoes. But her eyes hadn't changed. Neither had her heart. She took me home. Not just to her house, but to her world. Reese ran a small physical therapy center on the edge of Aurora called Back to Balance. It wasn't fancy, no gleaming machines or commercial slogans. But it had what I needed, peace, sunlight, and people who saw me as a person. She set me up in the guest room of her home, just down the hall from her teenage daughter's room. The first night, I barely slept. Every creak in the floorboards sent fear up my spine. Every shadow made me flinch. Reese noticed. So she did something I'll never forget. She installed a small nightlight. It glowed softly, amber like candlelight. She said, "Nothing dramatic. Just enough to remind you you're not in the dark anymore." We started therapy the next morning. It wasn't just stretches and mobility drills. It was the work of learning to inhabit my body again. At first, I hated it. My limbs felt like strangers. My left hand curled up like a dead leaf. My voice stuttered, my neck stiff, my legs unresponsive. But Reese was patient. "We're not here to fight your body," she'd say. "We're here to invite it back." Some days I made progress. Others, I cried through every movement. There were moments I wanted to give up. Then one morning something happened. We were working with a soft resistance band. Reese asked me to try to close my left hand. I expected nothing, but my fingers twitched. Just a little. She gasped. "You moved," she said. "Miriam, you moved." I started to cry. So did she. That day, I felt the first flicker of hope. Not because I could grasp anything yet, but because I had proven to myself that I wasn't gone. Week by week, I gained strength. I learned to sit up on my own, then to stand with a walker. Then one glorious day, to take 3 trembling steps across the living room. Reese clapped like I'd won a gold medal. Her daughter, May, made me tea and left little drawings by my bed. Flowers. Suns. A stick figure with wild curly hair in a red cape. "You're a superhero," she said one night. I didn't feel like one, but I didn't argue. Eventually, I began volunteering at Reese's clinic, folding towels, handing out tea, smiling at patients who came in with eyes full of shame, just like mine had been. I told them, it gets better. Not easier, but better. Some listened, some didn't. But I knew the value of hearing that sentence spoken aloud. Then one afternoon, Reese pulled out a dusty cardboard box from the garage. Inside were bundles of dried herbs, teas, tinctures, things I used to experiment with in my spare time long before the stroke. "You made these," she said. "I've kept them all these years. You should start again." At first I hesitated. But then I remembered the old part of me, the nurse, the healer, the woman who knew how to make a calming tea out of lemon balm and lavender. And I thought, maybe it's time to bring her back. We started small. Just jars labeled by hand. Friends of friends came to ask questions. Then a woman came in crying, said she hadn't slept in weeks. I made her a blend. She returned 3 days later glowing. "Your tea saved me," she said. And I smiled. Because maybe I couldn't fix everything, but I could offer something. And in that offering, I was healing too. It had been almost 4 years since I last saw him. Zach had been sentenced to 12 years. But the system let him out in under 5, good behavior, overcrowding, medical hardship. They called it justice. I called it unfinished business. By then I had my own place again. A small storefront tucked between a florist and a bakery in the center of Aurora. Rooted again. That's what I called it. It wasn't just a name. It was a declaration. I sold teas, tinctures, healing balms made from herbs I'd grown and blended with my own 2 hands. People came from other towns just to ask about insomnia, inflammation, anxiety, grief. And I had something for all of them. A few months before that morning, I received a letter from the State Corrections Board. Zach might be released early, good behavior, overcrowding, and medical hardship. I read it once, folded it in half, and tucked it in a drawer I never opened again. I told myself it didn't matter, that he would never come looking. But part of me knew, one day I'd see that face again. He was thinner, gaunt, pale, sitting in a wheelchair, his skin yellowed, one arm trembling as he pushed the door open. The bell above the frame jingled softly. "Mom," he said. That word. That cursed sacred word. I stood behind the counter, my hands frozen on a jar of chamomile. He looked up at me, eyes rimmed red. I didn't know where else to go. His voice was small. Not like the man who used to bark orders over my hospital bed. "I have multiple sclerosis," he continued. "It's bad. They say I'll lose more function. Maybe full paralysis." I didn't speak. He rolled forward another inch. "I'm staying in a shelter now. It's awful, Mom. Please." He started to cry. "I know I hurt you. I know. But I'm sick. I'm alone. You're the only family I have left." That's when I really looked at him. Not just his face, but what was left of the man who once terrorized me in silence, in bathwater, in whispers behind locked doors. He wasn't powerful anymore. He wasn't even threatening. He was just pitiful. But I didn't feel pity. I felt something colder. Not hatred. Not rage. Just clarity. I stepped around the counter. Sylvia, my assistant, glanced at me nervously. I nodded to her. "You can go to lunch. I'll lock up." She left. And the shop was quiet again, just me and the ghost of everything he had done. Zach's hands trembled on the armrests of his chair. "I'm not asking you to forget," he whispered. "I'm just asking for a second chance." I crouched slightly, eye level with him. "Do you remember," I said softly, "what you used to say to me?" He looked confused. "You used to say no one else would take care of you. That I should be grateful. That I'd die alone if not for you." I leaned closer. "Well, now you know what that feels like." He blinked, his face collapsing. "Mom, please." I straightened. "You made your choice," I said. "You chose to turn love into control, care into possession, my silence into your power." He tried again. "I'm sorry." "No." I interrupted. "You're desperate." "That's not the same." I walked to the door, opened it wide. "There are state programs, shelters, charity clinics, the same ones I could have ended up in. Go apply." He stared at me like I just struck him, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to, because this time I had something stronger than vengeance. I had peace. As he wheeled himself back through the door, his sobs echoed against the sidewalk. But I didn't follow. I didn't comfort. I didn't close the door right away. I stood there. Let the cold air rush in. Let the past drift out. Then quietly I flipped the sign to closed, locked the latch, and exhaled. These days people call me Miss Miriam, the tea lady, the woman who always knows what to brew for heartache, insomnia, or anxiety. But if you ask me who I really am, I'm a woman who crawled out of hell, a woman who rebuilt herself from the inside out, a woman who learned that survival isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just saying no with a steady voice and a locked door. And if you're watching this, and you've been trapped, manipulated, or silenced, I want you to know, you are not what happened to you. You are who you decide to become after. Ask for help. Scream if you have to. But don't ever believe that your story ends in the hands of someone who hurt you. Because healing? That's the loudest revenge of all.